I'm an X-28 weaker. I was told I'd never walk, talk, or even be a doctor. Matter of fact, they told my parents they'd keep my body warm and keep my body on a respirator so they could hold me for the first and last time before they buried me.
Wow.
So it's been very unique. At 18 months, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. I've had 18 surgeries. I have broken almost every bone in my body from falling. And I've learned that I'd rather walk with a limp in Christ than with a strut in the world. I will say this, that there are some things God could have prevented in his power that he allows in his wisdom. You've got to hold it differently. Because if I held out a water bottle for all this time, right? I held it out and I held it for, a couple minutes. I could hold it for a long time. But after 30 minutes, my muscles would begin to burn.
Yeah,
it would become almost insurmountable, right? But if I choose to hold it differently, it can be done.
Yeah.
And the question I have for everybody out there is, how long have you been holding that?
I'm Dr. Danny Huerta, Vice President of Parenting and Youth to Focus on the Family. With me today, I have Dr. Tyler Sexton. He's a child pediatrician. You're going to love to hear from him. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, Dr. Sexton, just in your professional line of work. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. It's a privilege. So I have a unique story. I'm an X-28 weaker. I was told I'd never walk, talk, or even be a doctor. Matter of fact, they told my parents they'd keep my body warm and keep my body on a respirator so they could hold me for the first and last time before they buried me.
Wow.
So it's been very unique. At 18 months, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. I've had 18 surgeries. I have broken almost every bone in my body from falling. And I've learned that I'd rather walk with a limp in Christ than with a strut in the world. And that...
That'd be a good t-shirt, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I love that. Yeah.
But that's, I will say this, that there are some things God could have prevented in his power that he allows in his wisdom. And you fast forward 20 years now, as a doctor and pediatrician, I was rejected in the US because of my disability. I took a very unique course to becoming a doctor, but I did it by the grace of God. And that's a story for another time that we highlight in my book and so forth. But
what's the name of your book?
No Such Thing as Can't.
Yeah.
Published by Focus and Tyndale. So appreciate it. It really talks about our journey with cerebral palsy and special needs. It talks about the struggles of a mother, my mother's struggles, her fight with suicidality and depression and how God delivers us from that. And we have another book called God Bless These Little Legs. So we were able to share our story of personal faith and what God's done for us and practical things on how to parent with special needs. But on top of that, after that, I always knew I wanted to be a pediatrician. Well, I became a pediatrician, both for outpatient, and then I was a pediatric hospitalist for 10 years. And then I also do hyperbaric medicine and wound care, both for pediatrics in the special needs world, autism, cerebral palsy, but also burns and wounds and a variety of different things. And so it's been a privilege. And now I get to use a lot of my practice, about 80% of it were special needs of any kind. I love the disenfranchised, the least of these. I was that person. I was that child that the world would say no, but people say no and God says yes. And I learned very early on that you can alter your life by altering your attitude and that my disability gives me credibility. And so I use that to be the most dynamic pediatrician that I possibly could be. And to be given a platform like this and partner with, with Focus and to look at parents and look at them and say, you're not crazy. Parenting is hard enough, period, right? Myself, I have two typical children, and then I adopted our atypical child who has special needs as well. And take that away alone, parenting's hard enough when you're typical. But when you add a special needs child into the mix, there's no guidebook for this. There's really not many support groups, which I love Focus, and I love the opportunity and the platform that I'm allowed to step into with you all as the ministry to say, I hear you, we see you, and we care. Because I will tell you that I tell people a lot of times to walk out of their comfort zone and come walk in mine. But this world of special needs parenting and children with special needs or chronic health care, it's a tough one. And there's not a lot of resources out there, right? And so to have a platform to talk about it has what I've built a lot of my career on. It's been a privilege.
So let's talk about it.
All right, let's do it.
Let's talk about this. So with a child with special needs.
Sure.
There's so many different challenges, right? Neurodivergent, they're in a different place as far as how they see the world, how they process the world, how they interact with the world. Not wrong, just different, and not the common.
Yep.
And then with that comes some unique special needs. Tell us just the early parenting, a parent that is parenting a toddler or an infant with special needs.
Sure.
What encouragement would you give them?
So the big thing here I would say is three things. The very, very first thing is realize that, and I'm speaking, and I hope no doctors out there are going to be mad at me what I say, but I live by a word of radical authenticity. Doctors don't know everything. I don't know if that shocks you. It doesn't shock me,
so
right?
True. Yeah.
But two things: doctors believe that they do, or some do. Not all. I'm not saying that. But at the same time, as a parent with special needs, you go to a doctor for answers, right? And I think the big thing is realizing that they're not going to have every answer.
No.
I always say that you're always an expert until you tell somebody something they don't want to hear. And to be able to bridge my own personal experience with cerebral palsy and overcoming that, and now as a practicing pediatrician, I can bridge that gap and say to you that, remember, as a parent, these doctors are looking at you for maybe an hour out of your normal day, right? Or a window.
A normal week.
A normal week,
month,
right?
Or,
it's like a keyhole perspective.
Right.
You have this huge door that you see, but the doctor looks through the keyhole. So he only gets a certain view. And so he might see that your child can't do this, he can't do that. The thing I will tell you that I always tell my parents, and my own mother and father taught me this, they dared me to dream instead of always looking at the next medical miracle. What I want people to realize, though, is I do not want to displace anything with quality medical education and partnering with a doctor. You have to have it. Doing it on your own and Dr. Googling is the worst thing you can do. I didn't go to medical school so that Dr. Google could tell me how to do our job, right? I'll just say that. That's a big thing that we deal with all the time, right?
It's true.
But I will say this, you have to gauge that medical information with still inlaid with hope and knowing that we serve a greater physician, that God does have control. And that in my own life, that we didn't dream big enough, that God had a bigger purpose and plan. And there are a lot of things that God uses. Like I said, he allows things that he could have prevented in his wisdom, that he could have prevented in his power, that he allows in his wisdom. You have to look at the disability in a different way to see the goodness of what God's doing. And what I mean by that is you change your expectations where maybe the child can't write the name yet, but they learn how to draw a line. Don't go from A to Z, go to A to B. And we are so guilty, all of us, like I said, finishing as fast as we can or keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Right.
The problem.
The comparisons.
Yes. The problem these parents
comparison.
have, that's exactly right. The special needs parent lives in its own island, right? Because it's constantly being compared to everybody else. Because either one, they look at themselves and say, my child will never do this. They can't do this. And that's very dangerous because you live in that negative perspective because that's not entirely true. You're not the author and finisher. You don't know the outcomes. God has a bigger plan. And so you self-impair your own child. You put restrictions on them because you already think it can't be done. And you don't mean to. And my mom was a helicopter mama, right? In a lot of these ways, the parents are trying to do it just to protect them because they've been ridiculed. They've been made fun of. They've been mistreated.
They become the greatest advocate.
Yes.
Right.
And they're the only ones now that can protect their child and become their voice. And so that's a big thing I would tell parents. One is be the voice when your child can't, but find that support system that is genuine and then push the envelope.
Where can a parent find that support system? Where do you think? I mean, that's a tough one.
That's a tough
depending
one.
on the community.
There are a couple places. One, and it's not to sound cliche, but one, the church. But I think it's, not every place. You're not going to find a great disabled program in a church. No. You might find a few if they're larger and they have the income for that or the support for that, or organizations like this, which is incredible. But that's not a everyday thing. You're not going to walk in and find a sensory room in every church.
Right.
So you find families that have walked through it with you. And the church is your first location. The other one I'll tell you is advocacy groups inside of the hospital system you came out of.
Oh, yeah.
Most of these kids and most of these parents have lived months in the hospital or have spent, if they haven't spent months in the NICU or the PICUs or the hospital floors, right? They've at least been admitted to the hospital 20 times, right? I mean, a lot of these parents, they have G-tubes or they have trachs or they have special needs, and whether it be communicative issues from autism or neuromotor issues like cerebral palsies and spina bifidas, they've seen plenty of doctors and they have met plenty of people in the waiting room. Yeah. I encourage people to step out of their comfort zone and talk to people. The biggest thing that I learned in my own practice and with my own family and my own mother, so I speak to this as a pediatrician, but also as a person who's lived it. Some of these parents are afraid to step out and share how they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the hurt that they're feeling, the insecurities they're feeling, you're not alone.
Challenges
the challenge they're facing,
yeah.
You're not alone. And when you can minimize your mountain, right? There's always gonna be stepping stones, and you have to walk the rocks to see the mountain views. I can promise you, these parents with special needs, they got a lot of rocks to walk. And I'll tell you, eventually though, those rocks become amazing mountain views and you see a lot of scenery. Now, the mountaintops are great, but these parents are living in valleys. And here's what I'll tell you too, an encouragement. Just like it says in the Bible where it says, you know, your word is like a lamp unto my feet, not a spotlight, not a fog light. If I was able to say, hey, give me a spotlight so I can see my entire 25 years, 30 years going into medicine, I can promise you I wouldn't be sitting here as Dr. Tyler Sexton, because I wouldn't want to do it. I was too afraid, too mistreated, physically, emotionally, you know, all those things. I wouldn't have done it. But step by step, day by day,
you're able to make it.
It is, yeah, and it's where it'll galvanize your faith. Sometimes you're holding on to God with your fingernails, and sometimes they're bleeding, but He will never let you go. And if He can do it for me, He can definitely do it for you. And I know that may sound, I hope that you can hear the authenticity when I speak to you and these people that are listening.
Yeah. Because
the big thing is to hold on to that hope and find those circles. And the big one, like I said, to recap, is in that medical community, in the rooms, in the churches, and then in the people that are walking alongside you in these NICUs and long-term care facilities.
Excellent. And so you said the three, right? So be the voice, have the community. Then I interrupted you on the third major one.
Well, and the third one is the breakdown expectations. This is the delicate one, right? Because this is where you have to gauge what the doctors say versus what you see. And I think that it's a delicate one, and as I look at it, you say, well, Dr. Sexton, what does that look like? And for me, I will say, it's about gauging and not listening just to one voice, but I will challenge you and say, be careful where you're getting that information, but also pushing the envelope and finding those doctors, those physical therapists, those people that genuinely believe and are willing to help you. There's a big thing in the special needs community called ableism. And I'm not sure if you know this term, but
bring it.
Yeah, just to explain this to you, ableism is a type of discrimination that special needs children or people with disabilities encounter. Just like in our case, there's sins by commission and sins by omission. And I look at ableism as by an omissional sin. I use that word loosely in this term, meaning that in ableism, people that are able-bodied look at these kids with special needs or look at me and say, well, they can't do that because of X. Because of Y, because of their physical limitations, because of their mental limitations, because of the autism, whatever it may be. And so they're actually these people that you surround yourself with are trying to be kind. Like in my case, we don't want to invite them to the movies because he can't walk up and down the stairs. I just want to be asked. I'll find my way up and down the stairs, whether I got to crawl or my parents drag me up or whatever it is, right?
But you just want to be asked. You want to be included.
Want to be included.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that the biggest thing that these parents will encounter, you may face blatant discrimination. I hope not for those out there. I did. And a lot of it, though, was ableism, where it was not even evil or trying to be mean. The big thing is breaking those molds, is finding a doctor that you feel comfortable with, is bearing everything to as a pediatrician or family medicine that you can look at and say, you know what, he does see value in my son or daughter. That's the biggest one, because that's going to break that mold to allow you to open it. Because there's a lot of studies out there with disability advocacy. If you look at our world, where the doctors are the gatekeepers to care or access to care. And if they inadvertently believe that, well, this access is too hard for them to get, or it may let them down, or whatever it may be, you inadvertently as a physician gatekeep a blessing or an opportunity for a child. Now, again, I know this is a lot to unpack in this conversation, and I could talk about this for literally hours. We should go part 6, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you, it's very, very important to try to break this up and find a way to access care a lot easier.
Yeah. The care. It's tricky. I mean, there are different types of special needs that have more care out there than others.
Right.
The most frequent one I get asked about is autism.
Sure.
How do I help my autistic child, or does my toddler have autism?
Sure.
And that's a challenging one. There's certain things that you're looking for in that child that is struggling with autism. There's a lot of conversation around that.
Sure.
What would you say to a parent that is trying to find help for their child that is struggling with autism, is on the spectrum?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is, if you're looking for a diagnosis, is you can't say no, and you got to start that process of where to look, right?
Yeah.
The different screening processes and things like that. And autism is a tough one too, because it's multifactorial, right?
Yeah.
You can't pin a direct reason of why this happened. One is, you got to take away the blame of the parents. It's not their fault, for one, when they can shed that and then they start advocating and getting in there. But the other biggest thing is community in the autistic world is extremely, extremely important, especially depending on where you're at. Like in rural Mississippi, where I used to practice, versus down in Florida, access is totally different. So talking to you in Florida and saying, there's 25 autism schools that can take, 30 kids every semester, that's a lot of kids, 1,000 kids they can take care of. But in Mississippi, we got, I had 2 autistic schools that I could refer to, for example, or individuals that specialize with them. So one thing is, it's hard because access to care is a big, big one. And so you have to look at other ways, or outside of the box ways of accessing that kind of care. The one thing I will say in this respect, when the autism community, or any community for that matter, but we're focusing on autism, this is where social media actually has its positives. There are very few times that I actually will advocate for social media, because
all right, tell me. Yeah, curious. I'm curious.
Because in most times social media, it can be a negative tool, and I've seen it on a lot of levels. But in this respect, when you look at special needs in parenting, is you have access to so many different programs that you may not have had where you're located. And a lot of, especially with the autism, is a lot of neurodevelopmental and therapies at home, and desensitization, and different technologies and behavioral therapies, right? And so you can access that through telemedicine, different technologies, by talking to these communities. The cool thing about, especially with autism, is some of these therapies you can access with opportunities through technology, meaning internet and things like that, where this, in terms of social media, is stepping into some of these social environments or these social circles that can say, I went here and this seemed to work. But there's a lot of, I'll say the word, with aggression, is there's prostitution in the industry too, right? Meaning that if you hear a glimmer of hope, if you tell these parents to go jump off a bridge to save their son, they're gonna go jump off that bridge, right? And that's the delicate balance, because there's people that prey on the hope of these parents.
Right.
So make sure you always govern that with discernment.
Yeah, because there's a lot of money to be made there.
Right. And that's the danger, right? So you pride yourself on finding that quality, but also realizing that it's multifactorial. But this is where, again, I say that the access to technology and Facebook or social media pieces can give you access to unique behavioral solutions.
I still remember a story of a mom. I'll never forget this home visit I did as a social worker in the schools. She was a mom, single mom. They had said, hey, this mom needs a lot of help. She's got 2 special needs kids. Doesn't have much government assistance, and let's do a home visit. So the occupational therapist, the speech therapist, and myself went to do kind of a home visit, home evaluation, and she was showing us around the house, and she had 2 young kids on oxygen, long tubes, Down syndrome. And I remember sitting down with her and just saying, hey, how can we be of help? Tell me a little bit about your story and let us know, how can we be of help? Sure. And she looked at me in the eyes, and she said, we have a lot. She looked at through the lens of plenty. They didn't have much. And she said, I wouldn't trade anything at this point in my life. This is exactly what I needed. And she said, let me tell you my story. She said, I was married. I was about to abort my first child when we found out our child had Down syndrome. My husband was upset at the time that I was going to keep the child. Once I left the abortion clinic and said, no, I'm going to keep this child, he was upset, but we stayed together, had another child. That was okay, still had stress. Third one, they said, yeah, you need to abort this child, has Down syndrome. The husband got upset that she wanted to keep this baby. And so he left. And that annulled their marriage, which made her now an illegal citizen of the United States. So she didn't have the care and everything she needed. And she said, these 2 kids have changed me in a very positive way. I love that God gave me all 3 in their uniqueness. And I wouldn't change anything And the other people were just amazed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They weren't, one of them was a Christian, the other one was not. And I was just like, man, what a testimony here.
Sure.
Of somebody saying, Lord, you've given me the gifts. Maybe it wasn't what I expected. And maybe I don't feel like a normal mom, and things are stacked up right now against me, but I'm going to be thankful.
Mm-hmm.
It totally changed her perspective, her perception. And man, we need people to be encouraging to parents that are in this place of exhaustion,
mm-hmm.
frustration, because that's a very real thing with kids with special needs. To get to this place where they're at peace with it, mm-hmm. and then plugged in with community resources. I love that you said community is key, mm-hmm. because man, it does feel lonely. When I've talked to some parents that are struggling, they have felt embarrassed, mm-hmm. to go find a community, or they've just had a huge challenge finding a community that is understanding of them. And it can begin within the churches, right? Mm-hmm. We can have, if you don't have a group at the church and you have a child with special needs, start one.
Yep.
Get it going. Initially, that'll be stressful, but maybe over time, as you have more volunteers, more people get involved, the stress level will go down. Mm-hmm. But that community is so, so key. So you don't feel alone, because you're not. There's so many families that have children with special needs, and kids that have done amazing things.
Yep.
Just like yourself. I mean, you're a walking miracle, a beautiful creation of what God has done through your life as you've served many, many clients. I mean, you said, how many do you have recently?
So we had
how many patients did you have?
Almost 10,000 in the practice.
10,000 in your practice.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's a lot. How many were special needs kids?
80%. So almost 8,000.
Almost 8,000 that you were caring for.
They were caring for, whether it was home visits to the system itself to all the different things. And I'll tell you,
I mean, look what God has done. That's awesome.
It's a testimony of that. I think what it comes down to is hold it differently. Like what you said, I think where I encourage people, instead of looking at it as a burden, look at it for ways of education. I'm not saying it's easy some days.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But you choose joy. Yeah. It is a choice. But as you train yourself to choose joy, or say, you know what, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not going to look at this as a burden, but as an opportunity to educate, you'll change the people around you. And if we could see ourselves the way these special needs kids see us as parents, or how much I see my mother being amazing and she thought she failed and it brought her into struggles with depression and suicide, which she did not succeed in her attempt. But if we could see ourselves the way that our children see us and use it in a way to impact and educate, you're also going to find that special needs is an amazing, I emulate with exactly what you said, how it's so transformative, because I wouldn't trade anything. Cerebral palsy, I've seen too much. I know too much to ever deny the power of Jesus Christ in my life. I have it easier than you. And I mean that because I know that Jesus is real. And I know you do, but I look at myself, if I was normal, would I be something more? I don't know. Would I be as close to Christ as I am today? Maybe not. That almost scares me. I'm so excited. So I tell these parents, you're going to see miracles day by day, and hold on to those, because he's going to hold you in his grip tighter, and he's going to show you he's never going to let you go, and reframe those things and use it for an opportunity to educate. But the key is for these parents, I know it's hard, and the only reason I can say this to you and be bold in saying it is because I know how they feel, right? I've seen it in my practice, but also in our own personal life. You've got to hold it differently. Because if I held out a water bottle for all this time, right? I held it out and I held it for, a couple minutes. I could hold it for a long time. But after 30 minutes, my muscles would begin to burn. It would become almost insurmountable, right? But if I choose to hold it differently, it can be done. And the question I have for everybody out there is, how long have you been holding that, right? How long has it been destroying you? The moment you let it go and let it be used as a testimony of what God can do. And I hope everybody finds the Lord through this and that, but even if you're not a believer, right? Holding it differently and changing your perspective will radically change your life and will make these moments not feel so overwhelming. And you're going to be a closer family. You're going to find that just as you've seen in your own testimony and this work with these children, that the special needs community, ironically, if you took all of us and asked, would you change anything? I believe, I can't give you a stat, right? I believe the vast majority would tell you I wouldn't trade a thing. What I wish I could change is what regular or normal people, which I don't like that term, because we're all handicapped, mind the world can see, but you're struggling with something, right, that we wish we could change. But all of us would say that you wouldn't trade a thing, and how much you'd learn because of our disability. And if the world could see that, and the value, the one thing we wish we could change is the value that people saw in us with the disabilities. And I think that's a big thing. So the takeaway for the normal folks or how you can help. On the other side, I say, well, if you're looking at this video and say, well, as a church or as a person, well, how can I help someone with a disability? Be available. Make it normal. Don't create a different avenue of engagement, right? We have the same jokes, we have the same hopes and dreams, we have the same desires as anybody else, right? I mean, I'm married with 3 kids now, and my wife is beautiful, and I had the same desires, and you know what I mean? And so normalizing those things is how you can help the special needs mother and father say, yes, they're like me. It just takes me 15 minutes to get out of the car, and it takes them 5 minutes, but they'll wait for me. Yeah. It's okay. And that's the big thing there.
That's so good. Well, parents, I hope you've been encouraged. Dr. Sexton, thank you so much.
Thank you
for being with me on this conversation. And the parents, just know that if you feel alone, if you're in a place where you're wanting some help right now, we do have a counseling line here at Focus on the Family. The line is 1-800-232-6459, and you get a consultation with one of our counselors here. They can refer you to a counselor in your area. And just know these parenting conversations are for you to really engage with us. So we love your comments. We love your questions for us. We want to interact with you. We want you to be a part of these conversations. And make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. We love to have you with us. And make sure you ring the bell of notification so you don't miss any of the videos. We've loved being with you today. See you again soon.